I always thought my sister and I were close. We laughed together, argued occasionally, but I believed there was love beneath it all, a bond that could withstand anything. That belief lasted until the day I realized just how far she was willing to go to make me look bad. It started with small things, little remarks she made to our parents that seemed harmless at first, subtle jabs about my choices, comments that made me pause for a second and question myself. I brushed them off, telling myself she was just jealous that it wasn't serious. But over time, the lies grew bolder, sharper, deliberate. She started telling my parents I was careless with money, that I wasn't responsible, that I was hiding secrets. People who had trusted me without question began to doubt me. Friends who once laughed with me now avoided me, unsure what to believe. And all the while, she wore that perfect, innocent smile, the one that convinced everyone she was harmless, even virtuous. I remember one moment more clearly than anything else. I was carrying a package my mother had ordered for me, walking into the living room, when she stopped me halfway with a look of concern. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked, "Did you even pay for this properly? I heard you got into trouble with the delivery company." I froze. My chest tightened, my heart pounding. I knew immediately that she had orchestrated this. I had paid for it in full online weeks ago. Yet there I was, being treated as though I were dishonest, as though I had done something wrong. Anger surged through me, hot and sharp, and I wanted to scream, to expose her lies in front of everyone. But something inside me held back. Clarity cut through the rage. Confronting her without a plan would be reckless. She had mastered the art of manipulation. I needed to be smarter than her. That night, I lay awake, turning over every incident, every whispered accusation, every suspicious comment that now made sense in the harsh light of truth. It was all her work, carefully planted and executed over time. And I realized that if I wanted my life back, my reputation, my peace, my dignity, I would have to outsmart her. I would have to dismantle everything she had built against me, piece by piece, and do it in a way she could never predict. For the first time, I felt a shift within me, a spark of determination. I wasn't just going to survive this betrayal, I was going to turn it into my advantage, to reclaim what was mine, quietly and deliberately, until the truth stood undeniable and she had nowhere left to hide. The next morning, I watched her closely, careful not to let her sense I was paying attention. She was in the kitchen, moving with that effortless confidence I had learned to recognize, the kind of confidence only someone who believes themselves untouchable can have. She hummed a tune, the same one she always sang when she was scheming, and I could almost feel the invisible armor she wore around her, the one that made her seem untouchable to everyone else. But I knew better. Everyone has a weakness, and I was determined to find hers. I began with subtle moves, small adjustments to how I navigated the world she was trying to manipulate. Every conversation with my parents became deliberate. I listened, remembered, and quietly documented everything she said that twisted the truth. I recorded my own version of events, not as a counterattack, not in anger, but as a clear, factual recollection, the kind of calm honesty that can't be argued with. I reminded my parents of details she had conveniently forgotten, little pieces of truth dropped into ordinary conversations so gently that they didn't feel like reminders. I stayed composed, precise, letting facts speak louder than emotions. At the same time, I planted seeds, tiny, almost invisible truths that could grow into undeniable proof of her manipulation. It was a careful, patient game, like chess, each move planned to provoke no immediate reaction, but to set the stage for what was coming. I could see the pattern forming, the way her control over everyone around her began to wobble ever so slightly, even if she didn't notice it yet. Then came the first serious test. She tried to ruin me at work, sending an email to my boss accusing me of mismanaging a client account. My stomach dropped for a moment, a flash of panic threatening to rise. But I didn't give it room. I had prepared for this. I had printed every email, every transaction, every scrap of evidence showing my dedication and integrity. I walked into my boss's office with calm confidence, laying the documents before him in quiet clarity. I spoke evenly, letting the evidence tell the story for me. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just the undeniable truth of my actions. And then I saw it. The first crack in her armor. The smug smile she always wore faltered when she realized her attempt had failed. The untouchable facade she had built for years flickered, and in that instant, I knew she had underestimated me. That tiny flicker of panic was my first victory, the beginning of her unraveling, and it was intoxicating to witness. I realized in that moment that the game had shifted. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was starting to take control. I knew that winning that one confrontation at work wasn't enough. She had spent years weaving a web of lies, twisting the truth to her favor, and manipulating everyone around us. Her deceit wasn't a single act. It was a lifestyle, a carefully constructed persona that made her seem innocent, trustworthy, untouchable. If I wanted to reclaim my life, my reputation, and my peace, I couldn't just respond impulsively or let her continue unchecked. I needed a strategy, a plan that would dismantle everything she had built against me, piece by piece, with precision. The first step was gathering evidence. I became meticulous, almost obsessive, combing through old messages, emails, texts, even social media posts. Every comment she had made about me, every half-truth, every exaggeration, it all became part of a larger pattern I could use. I took screenshots, saved files, printed conversations, and made careful notes on dates, times, and people involved. I started to see the bigger picture. Her lies weren't random, they were intentional, and each one had a target. Some were aimed at our parents, some at friends, some at colleagues, an intricate map of manipulation. Every false accusation she had ever made was a thread waiting to be pulled, and I cataloged them all, creating a detailed record that I could rely on. Step 2 was about influence, shaping perception without confrontation. I didn't need to confront her directly yet. That could backfire. Instead, I began letting small inconsistencies in her stories speak for themselves. In casual conversations, I would mention things she forgot to tell people, subtle truths that contradicted her narrative. I asked questions in passing that highlighted gaps in her story, never aggressively, but in ways that made others notice her hesitation. I noticed how friends and family began to pause before repeating her words, how their trust in her began to waver. I didn't have to argue or prove anything loudly. The truth, when presented calmly and clearly, had a power of its own. The third step, and perhaps the hardest, was patience. I had to watch her continue her manipulations, thinking she was still in control, while I quietly built my case against her. It was frustrating at times, seeing people still believe her lies or hearing her weave new ones, but I learned to wait, to let the evidence accumulate, and to remain calm. Each day, as I added more proof to my collection, I felt stronger, sharper, and more focused. Every lie she told became another opportunity to reveal her true nature, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. I also started mapping out her weaknesses. Everyone has them, even people who seem invincible. I observed her reactions to different situations, her reliance on others' approval, the moments she slipped up when her control faltered. These small glimpses of vulnerability became key pieces in my plan. By the time I was ready to make my move, I wanted it to be thorough. There would be no room for doubt, no chance for her to manipulate the story again. In those days, I felt a quiet sense of empowerment growing within me. For so long, I had been on the defensive, reacting to her lies and schemes. Now, I was the one orchestrating the moves, watching her stumble without her even knowing it. The satisfaction wasn't in revenge. It was in reclaiming my power, in taking back control of my life, and preparing for the moment when the truth would finally set everything right. By the time I finished cataloging every thread, noticing every flaw in her narrative, and planting the seeds that would make the truth unavoidable, I had transformed from a target into a strategist. Every step I took was deliberate, every decision calculated. And deep down, I knew that when the time came, she wouldn't see it coming. The web she had built to trap me would become the very thing that revealed her, and I would be standing there, unshaken, in the clarity of the truth I had patiently assembled. The plan was no longer just about exposing her. It was about proving to myself that manipulation and deceit cannot survive careful observation and unwavering patience. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't angry in a way that would cloud judgment. I was precise, focused, and ready. Every day that passed was another layer of preparation, and every lie she told added to the foundation I was building for the inevitable reveal. This was more than strategy. It was empowerment, and it was mine to wield. ChatGPT said, "The first strike came quietly, yet with a weight that no one could ignore. It was a family gathering, one of those weekends that should have been simple and warm, filled with laughter and familiar voices. But I knew she had been, planning her next move, eager to humiliate me in front of everyone, to make me the scapegoat once again. She thrived on these moments, feeding on the doubt she planted in others' minds. I could feel the tension as soon as we arrived. Her smile was calm, almost smug, the kind of smile that hid sharp edges beneath its surface. She didn't waste time. Midway through dinner, with everyone gathered around the long wooden table, she leaned in with that practiced innocence and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I can't believe you would borrow money from me and not pay it back. It's really irresponsible, and I'm tired of covering for you." Her voice carried authority, the kind that demanded agreement. A few cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of the older aunts exchanged subtle glances, eyebrows raised. Even my parents' eyes flickered with uncertainty for a fraction of a second. I felt the familiar sinking sensation in my stomach, the one I used to feel whenever her lies started to work. But this time, it didn't stay. I had prepared. I remained calm, letting her words hang in the air just long enough for tension to build. Then, without raising my voice, I reached into my bag and pulled out every piece of evidence I had collected. Receipts proving I had repaid the money weeks earlier, messages confirming the transaction, and even the contact information of a witness who had been present during the exchange. I spoke slowly, deliberately, each word measured, each gesture calm. "Actually," I said, "here's the proof. I paid back the money the same day, and here is the message where you confirmed it. And this person can vouch for it as well." The room froze. Every whispered doubt and judgment that had hung in the air evaporated instantly, replaced by silence. Eyes that had once doubted me now darted toward her, seeking answers. Her perfect, untouchable smile wavered, faltering, as she realized her carefully constructed narrative had been shattered in seconds. She tried to recover, her voice rising slightly, attempting to twist it into a misunderstanding, trying to frame it as a simple mistake. But it was too late. The evidence was concrete, undeniable, and the first thread of her flawless image had started to unravel in front of everyone. I felt a surge of relief, a rush of empowerment I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't about shouting louder or humiliating her with cruelty. It was about precision, control, and undeniable truth. Every calculated step I had taken in my plan had led to this moment, and it was exhilarating. I realized then that the best kind of revenge isn't dramatic or chaotic. It's quiet, meticulous, and completely irrefutable. I watched her face as the realization sank in. Her usual air of superiority flickered, and for the first time, she seemed human, nervous, uncertain, stripped of the armor she had always worn so confidently. People started asking questions, gently at first, but with growing curiosity and doubt. My parents, once hesitant, now looked at her in a new light, questioning her version of reality without me needing to push them. Cousins whispered to each other, casting subtle glances toward her, and even my aunts, who were notoriously loyal to family appearances, began to register the inconsistencies in her story. It was a revelation, not just for her, but for me. I realized that patience and preparation had more power than confrontation. I didn't need to yell or fight. The truth did the work for me. Her attempts to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly, and the balance had shifted. For the first time, I felt in control, confident that the next moves would be mine. That single, precise moment had set the stage for everything that would follow. From that day, I knew I could reclaim what she had stolen: my reputation, my dignity, my life. And she, for the first time, had begun to understand that her manipulation had limits. The first strike had been quiet, but its impact was profound. The unraveling had begun, and there was no turning back. By now, the tension between us had grown so thick it could be cut with a knife. I could feel it in the way she looked at me, sharp and calculating, and in the hurried, whispered conversations I occasionally overheard when she thought I wasn't listening. Her whispers had shifted. What used to be subtle manipulations had turned into frantic, desperate attempts to control the narrative. I saw the panic in the small gestures, the way her hands fidgeted when no one was looking, the fleeting moments where her confident mask slipped. But I didn't react. I stayed calm, serene even, letting her anxiety grow quietly, letting her mistakes accumulate. I watched her carefully, noting the patterns, the cracks forming in her composure. Every time she tried to twist a story, I observed and recorded, not in writing this time, but in memory, storing each detail with precision. I could see her unraveling, bit by bit, the very control she prided herself on slipping through her fingers. Her desperation became more obvious, more erratic, as if she were walking on the edge of a cliff and couldn't see the ground below. And all the while I kept my calm, letting her continue thinking she was the one in control. The confrontation came when I least expected it, though I had known it was inevitable. She cornered me in the kitchen one evening, her presence sudden and urgent, her voice trembling in a way that betrayed her fear. "Why are you doing this? Why are you ruining everything?" she demanded, eyes wide, searching mine for an explanation she could manipulate, a weakness she could exploit. There was no pretense, no careful mask. In that moment, she was raw, exposed, desperate, and I could see the consequences of her lies catching up with her. I smiled softly, almost sadly, letting the weight of my calm contrast with her panic. "I'm not ruining anything," I said slowly, deliberately, letting each word settle in the air. "I'm just showing the truth that you've been hiding for years." Her face went pale. I could see the flash of realization, the sudden understanding that she had underestimated me. Her eyes darted, searching for a way out, a path to manipulate the story one last time. But there was none. Every carefully built lie, every manipulation she had relied on, was now part of a record she could not erase, evidence that spoke louder than her protests. The weight of her own actions pressed down on her, and for the first time she understood that they had consequences she could no longer control. In that kitchen, everything shifted. I had remained patient, precise, and observant, and it had brought me here. The moment where her desperation collided with my calm and clarity. I didn't need to shout or accuse. I didn't need to expose her to anyone else yet. The confrontation wasn't about victory in the moment. It was about forcing her to recognize that she had lost control, that the game had changed, and that she had misjudged me profoundly. I saw the storm behind her eyes, the panic, the regret, the recognition that every step she had taken against me had only strengthened my position. She had spent years weaving lies, building illusions, and plotting against me. But now those very lies were like chains, binding her in a truth she could no longer deny. The shift was quiet, internal, yet devastatingly effective. And in that moment, I felt a surge of quiet triumph. I realized that the escalation of this conflict wasn't about confrontation or drama. It was about patience, observation, and letting the truth gradually strip away her power. She had cornered me, thinking she had the upper hand, but the reality was the opposite. I had orchestrated this, and now she could finally see what patience, precision, and quiet determination could accomplish. The kitchen, once an ordinary space, had become the stage for a silent reckoning. I didn't need to raise my voice or dramatize the moment. My calm, my collected demeanor, and the undeniable weight of truth were enough. She would never forget that moment. Not because I shouted, not because I humiliated her publicly, but because the realization of her own failure hit harder than anything I could have done. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning, the first true acknowledgement that her actions had consequences, and that I was no longer someone she could control. The final move was never meant to be loud or dramatic. It was meant to be precise, irrefutable, and undeniable. I had spent months gathering evidence, documenting every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to twist reality in her favor. Every text, every message, every misrepresented conversation had been carefully cataloged. I had timelines, screenshots, and witnesses. I knew that when the time came, the truth alone would have more power than any outburst or confrontation. This was not about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about restoring what had been taken from me, my life, my dignity, and my reputation. I began by sharing the evidence with my parents. I presented it calmly, methodically, letting them see the pattern of deception that had been built over years. I didn't raise my voice or accuse her. I simply laid out the facts, showing timelines of events, messages that contradicted her claims, and documented proof of her lies. I let them read, pause, and process the reality of what had been happening right under their eyes. I watched as confusion slowly turned into recognition, and then into a quiet, almost reluctant acknowledgement of the truth. Next, I reached out to my closest friends, people who had once doubted me, who had believed her stories for even a moment. I shared everything with them, showing how carefully her manipulation had been orchestrated. I didn't ask for apologies, though some were offered naturally, heartfelt and sincere once the truth became undeniable. Slowly, the walls she had built around her influence began to crumble. People who had been influenced by her manipulation now began to question everything. And I could see the shift. The balance of power was changing, and I was firmly in control. But the most satisfying part was watching her reaction as the ripple effect reached her social circle. Friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives who had only ever seen her side of the story were now confronted with proof of the reality she had hidden. Her carefully maintained image, the persona she had perfected for years, began to crumble before her eyes. She tried to defend herself at first, stammering, grasping for excuses, but the evidence was overwhelming. Every attempt to twist the story, every feeble justification fell flat. She was left speechless, her lies exposed, her power over others completely broken. The feeling of seeing her unravel was not about cruelty, it was about clarity. Finally, everyone could see the person I had always known her to be, and in that clarity, my life began to reclaim its rightful shape. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, a deep, quiet satisfaction that came not from hurting her, but from restoring truth and balance. Every apology I received, every acknowledgement from those who had doubted me, was a testament to the power of patience, strategy, and steadfastness. I realized in that moment that the true power of exposing someone isn't in the act itself. It's in the certainty and completeness of the truth. She had tried to manipulate reality for years, to distort perception, to twist people's understanding of me. But truth, once presented clearly and indisputably, leaves no room for deception. It forces recognition, demands accountability, and strips away false facades. As I looked around at the people whose trust I had regained, at the expressions of realization and apology, I understood something fundamental. The final move wasn't just about her being exposed. It was about reclaiming my own life. I had regained control, not through anger or aggression, but through calculated, unwavering determination. And she, my sister, who had once seemed untouchable, was left with nothing but the echoes of her lies, the weight of her own deceit pressing down on her. It was a quiet victory, but it was absolute. Her manipulation was undone, her power extinguished, and my life, my dignity, my reputation restored. I felt a calm sense of justice, a profound satisfaction that comes from knowing that the truth, when wielded with patience and precision, can accomplish what anger and confrontation never could. The final move had been made, and the consequences were irreversible. As I sit here now, looking back on everything that happened, I can finally see the lessons hidden beneath the pain and betrayal. At the time, it felt like my world had been turned upside down, like the person I trusted the most was intent on destroying not just my reputation, but the very foundation of my life. I spent countless nights replaying every lie, every manipulation, every moment I had felt powerless and alone. And yet, in that reflection, I've come to understand something profound. Revenge isn't about anger. It isn't about shouting, lashing out, or trying to hurt someone in return. True revenge, true justice, is about restoring balance, reclaiming your life, and doing so without losing yourself in bitterness. I didn't set out to destroy my sister. That wasn't my goal, nor would it have brought me peace. What I did was reveal her true self, expose the consequences of her actions, and let the truth speak for itself. And when it did, the results were inevitable. People who had been misled by her words recognized the reality for themselves. I didn't need to force it or manipulate it further. I had simply prepared, acted with clarity, and let honesty do the work. Life has a strange way of teaching you its lessons, often through the people closest to you. Sometimes those you love and trust most are the ones capable of betrayal that cuts deeper than anything else. It feels like a cruel twist, a test of patience and resilience. But the truth is, every betrayal, every deception, carries within it the seed of empowerment, if you approach it with strategy, calm, and focus. Patience is not passive. It is active preparation. Observation is not weakness. It is strength. And clarity, above all, is the weapon that can turn manipulation and lies into tools for reclaiming your own life. I've also learned that the best victories are quiet but undeniable. They don't need spectacle, anger, or chaos. They need precision, timing, and patience. The kind of victory that leaves no doubt, that cannot be disputed, that allows the truth to shine so brightly it cannot be ignored. That is the kind of triumph I experienced. It wasn't about punishing my sister. It was about protecting myself, asserting my worth, and ensuring that no one could take my life or reputation from me again. And my sister? We are not friends anymore. Perhaps we never will be. I've accepted that. Our relationship was built on deception from her side, and no amount of apology or reconciliation could erase the years of manipulation. But I have learned something even more valuable. I can protect myself. I can stand my ground. I can live without letting someone else define who I am or what I deserve. I've learned to trust my own instincts, to recognize when someone's intentions are hidden behind smiles, and to move forward with confidence and courage. Reflecting on it all, I realize that betrayal, as painful as it is, can be transformed into strength. The person who tried to break me inadvertently taught me resilience, patience, and the importance of strategy. The anger and frustration I felt could have consumed me, but instead, I channeled it into focus, into preparation, into reclaiming my life. And when the truth finally emerged, it wasn't just a revelation to others. It was a declaration to myself that I am capable, I am strong, and I am in control of my own story. In the end, the moral is simple but powerful. Deception and betrayal may cloud the present, but they cannot overshadow the truth forever. The people who try to undermine you will eventually be exposed, not always through loud confrontation, but through calm determination, strategy, and patience. And as for yourself, never allow anyone else to define your worth. Protect it, defend it, and reclaim it whenever it is challenged. That is the true measure of strength. I have taken back my life, my peace, and my dignity. I am no longer defined by someone else's lies. I am defined by my actions, my patience, and my unwavering commitment to truth. And that I know now is a victory that lasts far longer than anger ever could.